Today on Context, where was God in 2014? I think the answer might surprise you.
From scandal to Sochi, from ice buckets to the inexplicable, from ancient feuds to brave new frontiers, from believe it or not leadership to outbreak, to shots fired on a hill that echoed in every part of the land. What do a year's worth of headlines say about the place of God in the world? It turns out, plenty. Welcome to the special edition of Context with Lorna Duick, 2014 in Review.
This studio is usually buzzing, but today it's quiet, with our audience at home, like you, celebrating the holiday. So it's just you, me, and our faithful crew. And today we'll be taking a look back at the stories that mattered most to Context in 2014, the good, the bad, and even the shocking. When a gunman stepped up to Ottawa's cenotaph, then into the front door of Parliament's centre block, a nation changed. Context traveled to Ottawa to find out how and why, and how God would have us respond after the shots echoed. Days after the shootings, we stood at the cenotaph with Globe and Mail writer and Muslim educator Shima Khan for some insight into issues the shocking crime has raised.
These are our kids, so to speak. You know, they're Canadian, and we shouldn't be turning a blind eye. Why is this happening? Why are we having, and just to write it off as we have nothing to do with it, it's not a problem, I think it's totally irresponsible.
Former Cabinet Minister Jack Murda took us to the Hall of Honour, where the gunman's life was ended. With bullet chips still fresh in the marble around us, he told us of the all-party prayer meeting he had led earlier that same morning, and how a heart centered to God keeps us focused amid fear.
Whether it's a security alert or whether it's a serious accident that we're having within our own family or with ourselves or whatever, you know, it just it allows us to think that, you know, that while things seem to be falling apart, there's somebody out there that has got it in control.
That voice was in great need through 2014, from the death of Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent in Quebec to the loss of 3 RCMP officers in Moncton, New Brunswick. Sorrow and fear were big themes in 2014. 2014 marked the newest chapter in the oldest profession. With Canada's existing prostitution laws struck down, the federal government responded with Bill C-36, which received royal assent in November. I sat down for a moving interview with Bridget Perrier, a former sex trade worker and founder of Sex Trade 101, a group that helps current sex trade workers find exit strategies.
I think it will save women. I think that we need to look at the damage that men who pay for sex, what they do to prostituted women and girls. I think that our bodies aren't commodities, and there's a sacredness when it comes to sex, and it's totally not looked at. It's not enjoyment on the seller's behalf, it's enjoyment for the buyer. And these men do things with you that they wouldn't ask their wives to do. It's very degrading and humiliating. You have to gauge them. If their pupils are dilating, you know you're going to be in a fight. And I believe that prostitution is a form of paid rape.
We also sought insights about the market for prostitution. That we learned from Tony Schneer, who teaches at a John School.
Some of the core beliefs for men who are struggling with sexual addiction is that I'm basically a bad or unworthy person. I'm unlovable. If I have to depend on other people to have my needs met, then I'm sort of in trouble, and that sex is one of my most basic needs. And here I think is really where the gospel message becomes quite relevant to men who are struggling with sexual addiction, because it sort of answers those questions. It responds to those fears and those doubts and those anxieties that they have.
Bill C-36, making prostitution much less accessible in Canada, was passed just days after we aired that episode. The end-of-life debate continued through 2014 with passage of Quebec's Bill 52, the so-called right to die legislation. Later, the issue reached Canada's Supreme Court, whose ruling is expected in a few months. I sat in on that court hearing earlier this year. My blog history has detailed links on the case, and you can read my column on this topic, which was published in the Globe and Mail. All that can be found at contextwithlornaduick.com under blogs and articles. Well, misery swept through the Middle East in 2014, with destruction and bloodshed of the civil war in Syria and Iraq creating a devastating refugee crisis. More than 1 million people have been displaced in Iraq alone. The brutal rise of ISIS stirred and continues to stir an incredible response here in Canada, like Insaf Safu and Lorraine Roche, two concerned Canadians who simply went into the war zone to see how they could help.
They are teachers, they are engineers, writers, physicians.
Insaf, you are an Iraqi Canadian, and I was shocked to find out you just picked up your bags and went back. You've gone back twice. You're just back last night. What did you see?
I saw people. They found themselves suddenly no home. They live in a tent, school building, church building, stadium. Like future is black. They don't know what's the next. They lost everything, all belongs. They are facing future, unknown future, cold winter. It's a very hard situation for Iraqi people, and unfortunately, like they are refugee in their homeland.
Joining us from Erbil, Iraq, Bruce Piercy of Samaritan's Purse was quick to see drops of hope in the sea of despair.
I came here expecting to find people who were traumatized. Perhaps their faith had been shaken, maybe strengthened by having to make that choice and flee. What I have seen is not fear, but incredible resilience. I was at a church service, church building. They had a celebration last night, and it was 3 hours of just singing and worshiping God, and they rocked the roof off the place. And I talked to people, and I didn't realize till afterwards, half the people in the room were from Mosul. There's people who had lost everything, people who'd had their lives threatened, yet they're praising God for what He's done in their lives.
That's where Canadians have begun to come in. Looking no farther than a church in my own neighborhood, St. Paul's Parish, we learned how volunteers sponsor refugees from this war. It was time for a 101 course in how to help. Serena, when our viewers call you and they say, I saw that thing on Context, I want to help a refugee family come to Canada, what are you going to ask them? What should they expect?
Yes, we really want to help you take the next step into refugee sponsorship. And so we're going to have you tell us if you're a group, because you'll notice in the video that it wasn't one individual trying to change and bring a family. It takes a team. So we need to know that you have a team gathered together. Then we're also going to ask where you're located, because the refugee family that comes is going to be in your community, and we need a community to surround them, because refugee sponsorship is not just a financial commitment, it is a relational commitment, and so we need people to get involved. And then I'm also going to ask what your commitment level is, because there's going to be some people who have the finances, but they don't have the time, and so they can't do that relational investment. So we're going to suggest to you to contribute to a refugee fund. There are going to be some people who have the time, maybe not the finances. We're going to connect you with a group that will take you in partnership to work together towards sponsorship.
Since that broadcast, more than 55 groups of people have called the Context hotline to sponsor a refugee family from Iraq. And you can still take this great need on. For those of you who'd like to learn more about sponsoring a refugee family, you can visit our website, contextwithlorna.com, for more information. Well, in a century since post-traumatic stress disorder was written off as shell shock, Public awareness is finally growing. It was a significant story of struggle for Canada's military on this issue this year. We asked how to be ready to respond to the growing need. I put the question to Canada's first Veterans Ombudsman, Colonel Pat Stogren.
Absolutely, categorically not. You know, when I was the Ombudsman, I was forecasting a tsunami of problems with the troops who have served over in Afghanistan that would be manifesting themselves somewhere downrange. And I had no idea that we would have this rash of suicides this quickly. And we've seen that not only the bureaucracy, but the government seems to be absolutely incapable of using any creative thought or any judgment in rectifying the problem.
From retired Corporal Sylvain Chartrand, we got a first-hand description of coping with PTSD.
We're mostly all the same. It depends on the intensity, but there's basically trouble concentrating, flashback, there's night terrors, nightmares, to different various levels. Sometimes it could be worse, sometimes less. A sense of, hopelessness to a certain degree that things, will not get better. You've lost the interest in the things that you used to do before. You've done something, you're a changed man. Before Bosnia, I was someone, and then coming back, I'm someone else. I'm not the same person.
The courage and frankness of General Romeo Dallaire has inspired countless Canadians. In our look at post-traumatic stress in the military, we caught up with Major Brent Beardsley, who assisted General Dallaire in the hell of the Rwandan genocide. He had this to say about the presence of God amid such intense evil.
Well, as a Christian before I went to Rwanda, and of course when it sunk into the hell that it became, what I leaned on heavily was my faith. And it was the prayers in the morning and the prayers at night that got me through days, over the night and on into the next day. Surprisingly, when I got home from Rwanda, a lot of people asked General Dallaire and asked myself the question. They said, how is it that with everything you've seen and done, you can still believe in God? And General Dallaire said, I know I believe in God because in Rwanda I shook hands with the devil. For myself, my comeback to them was always, why do we blame God for the actions of man? I never saw God at a roadblock with a machete chopping up a child. I never saw God going into a village with a machine gun to murder folks. I saw people doing that. If I lost faith with anything in Rwanda, I lost my faith in human beings and the great evil that they are capable of doing. But I certainly didn't lose my faith in God, and in fact, it was reinforced in my time there. So unlike some folks who, going through that experience, lose their faith, other ones find a faith, it sustained my faith and grew it.
After the break, we'll take you to some of the most unexpected places we went looking for God in 2014, from the middle of a desert through to the hell of high water, as our special 2014 Context in Review continues. I'm excited to put The Angel Effect into Lorna's books for you to win a copy this week. I love this book because it is full of stories of people's encounters with angels. The Angel Effect explains what science can tell you about our encounters with angels. It helps you understand the widow effect, the angel switch, the role of emotions with angels, and the mysterious, strengthening power of angels around us. So go to our website, contextwithlorna.com, click on Lorna's books for your chance to win a free copy of The Angel Effect by John Geiger. That's contextwithlorna.com/Lorna's books, and win your free copy of The Angel Effect.
To add your voice, call us at 1-800-215-4913. Email us at comments@contextwithlorna.com or reach us by Facebook or Twitter.
Welcome back. Often, news has time to only give you part of the story, which is why in 2014, Context traveled to High River, Alberta to learn about life after its famous flood. There we learned that oftentimes it's when you lose everything that you are most connected to God.
There was water raging down our street, and I tried to get the RV all the slide outs in and tried to get the RV out, and I couldn't, and a man from ATCO came in and grabbed my son and said, run. So I grabbed my guitar and my dog and my purse and a box of our files and ran.
For Pastor Chris Huco, whose own family was forced to relocate, his understanding of God was called on by hundreds in crisis. And that meant Pastor Chris wasn't without a few questions for his Creator.
I would love to say that God and I have never been closer, but I think I've really wrestled with a lot of questions too. I think like a lot of our people have. This was certainly not what I would have, engineered.
We had an inside track on High River's flood because Context took on a family to cheer and pray for, from when the first waters began to rise to the long road to cleanup. Flood victims Carla and Gary Adolph inspired us. You wrote on your last blog that you've had to trust that God will give you wisdom for decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Give me an idea of the complexity it has been to recover this house.
Well, I think the first thing that you have to remember is if it was just us that had been hit, or just 10 homes that had been hit, everything would have progressed at a speed that would have been much more reasonable for your expectations. But when you're dealing with a whole entire town and all of the businesses, services, and homes, then you have to be patient. You have to be patient. And you have to trust that things like money and where you're going to live and how you're going to fix your house, it's better to handle those things in a state of patience and trusting than in a state of striving.
In 2014, Context went to a place that hasn't seen a flood in a very long time, the Nevada desert. Why? Well, naturally, we wanted to see where God would surface at the infamous Burning Man.
Imagine, for example, if a Burning Man is what, 68,000 this year, which isn't that many people really, except its reputation reaches everywhere. It's startling.
65-year-old Larry Harvey is a former gardener, handyman who began all this in 1986, when with a dozen friends, he said, let's build a statue and burn it. Each year, the growing group of friends made Burning Man bigger. It soars over 30 meters, and Burning Man, the structure, does not have a meaning. It's not meant to be a pagan symbol. It's just a cool thing to burn at the end of a week-long party. But the community that has been created around the burn and its values, now that has significance and purpose.
Immersion environment, that's what this is. It's enormously persuasive, and it tends to produce what if you objectively look at it, amount to conversion experiences and lead people to make great changes in their lives.
2014 was a year of many departures, from the funny, Robin Williams, to Joan Rivers, to the insightful, former Finance Minister Jim Flaherty and Maya Angelou. Each of them touched our lives in different ways, and we are grateful for the stories they helped shape. We also reported a story Canadians don't like to hear, that we're slipping in addressing the need to eradicate child poverty in Canada. 25 years have passed since our country's parliament promised to eradicate child poverty by the year 2000. Since then, child poverty has actually increased. 1 in 7 children are affected. In British Columbia, the number is closer to 1 in 5. Adrienne Montani of the group First Call BC told us about a day in the life of a child living in poverty.
An average day would be a family waking up to perhaps an inadequate breakfast or even no breakfast, so arriving at school for a young child or even a teenager with no breakfast. Perhaps some stress the night before over a conversation of whether you needed new shoes or not and whether you can afford them. A stressed parent perhaps at home who's trying to decide between connecting to the internet or buying new shoes. Those kinds of tough decisions for low-income families. It's feeling excluded at school when you can't participate in field trips or other kinds of activities, social activities that other kids are participating in, and perhaps being hungry and distracted and therefore having difficulty settling in to learn. That's a typical scenario for a low-income family.
From his unique view, the retiring Dave Toyson, who made this his last year of being CEO of World Vision Canada, reminded us of the particular calling Christians have to help poverty. Okay, you heard this song all through the episode so far. It's just going to be with us forever, so stop your whining. Is it going to be with us forever in Canada?
Well,
child poverty?
I think the important thing isn't whether it's going to be with us forever. What are we doing about it to make it less? Okay,
All right.
I think that's the answer to that question.
Okay, and you believe, as a Christian, we are particularly obligated to care about this issue. Why?
Oh, absolutely. The Lord's Prayer talks about making earth more like heaven, and God needs partners. And it's amazing that God would stoop to want to use a bunch of human beings who get in trouble all the time, but we're supposed to be the hands and feet of Jesus. That's what we've been called to do. And fighting child poverty is just one important dimension of that.
In 2014, Context focused on Canada's 30,000 young people without a forever home. The urgent need for adoption in Canada continues. And for thoughts on that, we went right to the top, to Canada's head of state, Governor-General David Johnston. He spoke of his own faith, his need for daily prayer, and for the ongoing need of those thousands of Canadian children.
Well, here, of course, is the need. 30,000 children in foster care who are longing for a permanent loving family. We only place about 8% of those. When we did our work in Ontario, we finished in June of 2009, there were about 10,000 children in foster care. We were placing a little under 900 per year, so that's what, 8% or so, and the average age of placement was about 13. And it just broke my heart to see the 91% who weren't placed, because we would see these kids, situation after situation, longing for a permanent loving home, and then many potentially adoptive parents with whom we simply couldn't make the match to these children. So that was point one, this important need and this woeful gap in matching loving parents with children who need it. I guess the second thing was that so many of the barriers that exist are ones that we can overcome, particularly through understanding and awareness of this number of children and their needs. And I think the third thing was that to be very mercantilistic about it, it is so much more cost effective to put the effort into adopting children from foster homes rather than having them carry on till 18 with a very large number, ending up in situations that, quote, cost our social systems, our justice systems, our health systems an enormous amount of money. So a little bit of wise investment now in helping to place many more of those 30,000 children in loving homes is enormously important on a social point of view and enormously important on an economic point of view.
The needs of Canada's First Nations people continue to be a major story shaping Canada. Context unpacked the issues within Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and as author, poet, and storyteller Lee Maracle told our guest host Sheldon Neal in Eternia, the term truth and reconciliation hangs poorly on this process.
Well, first of all, I don't call it in my mind and in my heart a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. When reconciliation happens, two parties get together, one that has victimized the other, and they reconcile. That didn't happen. It's really a big disclosure by 7,000 Aboriginal people about what happened to them. And then it's disclosure by some of the children of those survivors, or some of the people that have become friends of survivors. But none of the people that were in those institutions doing the hurting had to face anybody. So that's not reconciliation to me. It's disclosure. And on my bad days, I think it's voyeurism.
The journey to healing for those whose families survived residential schools is still underway. We listened as Mary Lou Mintrem explained how her family is on that journey.
I first would like to listen to their story. You know, everybody has their own journey, and everybody wants to be able to find, you know, how to be able to walk in a good way in their journey. And for me, for what helped me with my faith and everything was having a listening ear, and then from there be able to be in a point where I can receive, you know, because I opened up. I shared my story. I shared things that are concerning, that I have concerns of, and that shouldn't be taken lightly, right? So giving respect to that person and hearing their story, and then being able to go, can I share with you my story? You know, let me share with you how I got through my difficult time.
And that's been most of our look at some stories in 2014 that Context won't soon forget. My thoughts on the power of finding the helpful steps of the year that was when we return. Click contextwithlorna.com to access exclusive web resources. Do a topical search on a subject you need to know. There's blogs, articles, links, and previous episodes. Life beyond the headlines. That's contextwithlorna.com. Coming soon on Context, I sit down with Anne Rice, the author who made vampires famous, and look at her character Prince Lestat and what her own relationship with Jesus is like today. You won't want to miss it.
This segment is brought to you by Bruce Etherington and Associates, Family Harmony and Philanthropy, helping you help others.
At Context, the stories that shape your world are what matter most, and we strive to tell them in a way that lets you see where God is at work, beyond the headlines. From the shock of the Ottawa shooting to the heartbreak story of child prostitution, God was there. How do we know? Because you could always find help for the news dilemma. You know, Fred Rogers was famous for saying that in times of trouble, look for the helpers. The helpers, or the light shining through the darkness, are always present because that is how God delivers hope and help. 2014 saw lots of helpers. Those of you at home who watched our show and felt compelled to donate here, that was God working through you to do this program, and we can't thank you enough. You, our viewers, also called to start refugee sponsorship for more than 55 families out of Syria and Iraq after we brought you their need. Thank you. At Context, we want to encourage you to follow in the footsteps of Jesus and to continue to be a helper. And we will continue to give you stories that inspire. From all of us at Context, may your 2015 be merry and bright. Happy New Year. We'll be back next week exploring more stories that inspire life beyond the headlines.
We had an election. We worked before the election to protest certain things going on in the Markham area, and we got lucky and we won the last election. There's 4 women now on council in Markham.
And more globally?
And more globally, of course. You have to pray every day these days, it seems, because of all the nonsense that's going on between religions, which some people want to bury their heads in the sand, and other people are very, very aware of.
The fact that a Canadian soldier was murdered on Canadian soil the first time since the 1800s, unfortunately, meant that we were in different times. We've also sent military to foreign areas, and now we've got a long-standing, we're back at war, basically. So I guess for 2014, I'd like to be positive and be happy, but it seems like we're in the same war, just different name, and I wish we could somehow break the cycle.
It's not too late to send us your comments, voicemail, email, Facebook, or Twitter. The conversation continues.